We left unscathed from that farmer's market on the way back from Turkistan. Our driver, it was a cab this time, and I don't think he spoke much English. He was pretty restless. He was anxious to get going, and we were sort of relieved we weren't in jail or didn't have to part with some of the money. So we started heading back to Shymkent, and we're riding along Little Two-Lane, and it wasn't too long before up on the hill on the left, not really too far away, we saw a lot of horses with people on them and people without them and cars, just something going on not too far away. So we headed up in that direction because we were traveling, we were looking for adventure, we had our cameras, and that's what you do. So we got our driver to go up there, and it turns out they're playing Bushkazi. And this is the reason why we went to Kazakhstan. But this wasn't the sanitized Bushkazi that we saw at the Nowruz festival in Shymkent, you know, with teams and a field laid out sort of like a football field. This was big open meadows with more than 100 participants, all different sizes and age groups and horses. And of course, what was interesting about Bushkazi is that these guys wear these old padded, like exactly helmets that you saw fighter pilots wearing, the padding over their ears, and high boots, and you know, like football players. This is a rough game, and they wear a lot of padding. So anyway, we park and we get our cameras. Alan usually carried a couple of cameras in his camera bag, one I guess with a wide angle lens and maybe a telephoto. I don't know. I usually carried just the one camera with my normal lens, and we're heading along. And there's a little cinder block building. I mean, it's not more than like 20 feet long and 10 feet deep, and there was somebody on it with a little microphone and some speakers, and I don't remember us talking to anybody, Alan or I, but the next thing we know, I hear New York Times, you know, and we're surrounded by people, and they're sort of happy to see us. And somehow the conception or misconception that, you know, we were photographers from the New York Times, and these guys were really happy to see us. And you know, there was money being collected and money being paid out to the winners. So you know, I took out a $5 bill, which went a long way in Kazakhstan. Anyway, they lifted Alan up and they put him on top of the cinder block building, which made him very happy. He liked that vantage point for taking photographs. I didn't like it. I stayed down on the ground, and anyway, they start playing Bushkazi. Bushkazi, Persian word or Afghani word for pulling goat. You know, and they use a goat or a lamb. In a lot of instances, they use a calf. It gets decapitated and the inside's taken out and it's sewn up. And the idea is to pick up the carcass from your horse and run it down the end of the field or to a location that has a big circle, and you drop it in the circle and you win a prize. Of course, what goes on is that people are kicking you, hitting you with their whips, which they will keep in their mouths as they ride, pulling you off the horse. It's a violent game, and very exciting, you know. And I stood somewhat on the outskirts with my camera, but you'll have a herd of horses turning in a flash, and there were several times where I really had to run out of the way because I would have been run down. But I got some great photographs. So this was Bushkazi. Alan was on the top. I was running around trying to follow what was going on. Very exciting. Finally, when it was done, they convinced me to get on a horse. I did it. These were these smaller horses that you see in Central Asia with ancient type saddles, but they were ferocious with these flaring nostrils, and I'm glad they didn't let go of the stirrups. Very exciting. But afterwards, they were tailgating Kazakh style, and they'd open up the trunk to a car, and there'd be goat, big piles of rice, whiskey, beer, carrots, flatbread. At one point, they were slaughtering a couple of calves, and these guys, there'd be big smiles on their face as the blood was rushing out from the jugulars. But it was a wonderful experience, and we got some wonderful photographs. Our driver was fit to be tied when we finally got back and returned to Shymkent.